I'm Carmen Fernholz, an organic farmer. I live near Madison, Minnesota, which is in Lac-La-Croix County, and I operate about 450 acres of certified organic acreage and CRP and restored prairies. Why did I decide to be an organic farmer? And I know every time I've done an interview or talked to people, that's generally one of the first questions, and I think it's totally appropriate, obviously. And over the years, what I've really narrowed it down to is I think it happened when I was about 6 or 7 years old. I tell the story about my father and mother getting or having a subscription to the Rodale's Organic Gardening and Farming magazine. And we would look at it, you know, it didn't resonate with a 6 or 7 year old, but I knew there was, I shouldn't say I knew, but there was something happening in the minds of my mother and father. And they would talk about gardens and sprays and nutrition and all these things as it was being written about in this magazine. Well, you know, 30 years later, I'm starting to farm, and all of a sudden, the message that I didn't even know I was getting back then was starting to come back to me. Because not only getting that magazine, but my father would never let the garden be sprayed. And he had a little wheat grinder, because we'd grind wheat and my mother would bake bread and things of that sort. And he would portion out an area of the wheat field that would not get sprayed either, and that was used for the wheat that we would grind for flour. So again, another little subtle message that was coming through. And finally, I looked at it. My father operated about 240, sometimes up to 300 acres, depending on how much he would rent. And my mother and father raised 9 children on those 240 acres. We never went hungry. We always had adequate food. We certainly didn't live high on the hog, as people say, but we were never wanting for anything. And so I looked at all those things, and in the early years, I think a lot of farmers were organic by default, simply because the chemical and fertilizer ideas weren't really on board yet. And so thinking about all those things, so when I started farming in 1971 or 72, I can never remember the exact year, these things started coming back. And having had a college education, you know, you do realize that you do have a little bit of self-motivation to try things, and so that was sort of a challenge that I was going to put in front of myself. See if I can't do it the way it was done when I was a child growing up. And I would not be honest if I didn't say there has been and there continue to be challenges to meet the appropriate economic levels to maintain it, but it's certainly doable. And so when I started farming, I looked to plan to do it back then when people really didn't even say the O word, organic. There weren't any standards, no government regulations. It was just what people wanted to do.